Starting an online business can be a lonely ride, especially when you're trying to change the world one day at a time. But you're home now, in a place where inspiration flows thick and fast, and we arm you with the how-tos to get started, grow, and thrive in business. Welcome to the Wellness Entrepreneur Podcast with business coach and trainer, Katie Wyatt. The mission of the show is to simplify online business so you can focus on your mission rather than your marketing, because it doesn't have to be that hard. Let's leverage your time so you can have more impact and amplify your message. You are a change maker. We need you loud and clear. Wellness entrepreneurs. Passion can change the world and make good business.
Hi, gorgeous ones. How are you? Welcome to episode 49 of The Wellness Entrepreneur. Yeah, that means next episode is episode 50. Oh my God. And that makes me speechless, which is not a good thing to be on a podcast. But anyway, I'm exhausted, I am sure, after a massive weekend at Artful. But actually, I can't lie because I'm recording this in advance so that I can fall in a heap after Artful, and I haven't even been to Artful yet. The joys of recorded audio. But thank you for all of your feedback on the last episode and also the excitement about my new show with Elle Roberts, #LadyBossChats. Keep it coming. We love to hear it. And please remember, while you're in iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review so that more people can find me and I can find them. And that's just exciting. So, as you know, because I've been adding this one into episodes lately, is action takers are money makers. So, your actionable tip this week is to work in 30-minute sprints. I have started to do this week. What is a sprint? First of all, Katie, back up, Katie. A sprint is just a focused, intense work period. So it means that you shut down everything, the internet, Facebook, email, or, if you don't need to shut it down, you can just ignore it, then you're weird and I love you. But if you need to shut it all down, you set the alarm, you know the one thing that you're going to work on, and you just go hell for leather. I have started this up again this week. I really fell out of the practice of it, and I've done it with the help of productivity coach Joe Bendel, who is amazing, who has helped me map out a weekly schedule in advance because, because twins, I actually only can assume I have 90 minutes a day over and above organised coaching time to work on my business, which doesn't sound like a lot. So it means that I need to allot my time and dates to everything I need to get done in a week. The benefits of working in a sprint is that it does make you uber focused. You only work on one thing. You ignore Facebook and all those other distractions and you just get it done. The other big aha moment that it's given me is how long tasks actually take, because if you're anything like me, you might be a little over optimistic about what you can achieve in the time you have available. I found that I've given myself 30 minutes to do a task, and then I've realized that it actually needed an hour or it needed 90 minutes. And so while that has kind of stuffed me up a bit this week, it's helped me do is learn how long things take. And this is both useful for myself and my next weekly schedule, but also really good if you're starting to think about outsourcing and knowing how many hours a week that you want to get somebody in. So have a go and let me know. This episode is brought to you by my business, The Wellness Entrepreneur. I'm the CEO and the chief bossy pants of this business, and I work with gorgeous entrepreneurs just like you who are starting out or are ready to grow and take on the world like a lady boss superstar. You can work with me as a private client, or you can join one of my podcasting masterclasses or programs. Get more details at thewellnessentrepreneur.com.au, and hey, drop me a line, drop me a social media post, let's chat. If you're not part of my Wellness Entrepreneur private Facebook community, then you are missing out, my friend. Come and join. We are like 1,200, 1,300 people strong, and we want you there. We just, there's a big U-shaped hole in that group. So come over to bit.ly/start, grow, thrive, or just search Wellness Entrepreneurs in the search bar of Facebook. Now, let's dive in. Today's episode, we're going to hear the other side of last episode's story about why you don't need traditional media. This week, it's all about why you do and how to get it. And Lisa Simone Richards is here. She's a PR guru. She's going to give us all the goss, so let's go. Lisa Richards, welcome to TWE HQ. How are you? Where are you? What's going on?
I'm doing fantastically, Katie. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. It's such an honor to be a part of a show that I listen to so religiously. So I'm hoping I can share some great value with your listeners tonight. And I am recording here from Toronto, Ontario in Canada.
Oh, that's so exciting. I was just in Canada in the past couple of months. It's a gorgeous place.
Good. I hope you had a wonderful experience when you were visiting us.
I sure did. And so, look, I wanted to start by just telling the listeners how we connected, because it was a really gorgeous way, I thought. So you contacted me with a beautiful idea for coming onto the show, and you had a few ideas for the things that you would talk about. And I wanted to mention it because I get a lot of pitches for the show, and they're not all good pitches. And it's a topic I'm really passionate about. So I did just want to say, first up, thank you so much for taking the time to do a beautiful pitch that was lovely to receive and accept.
Fantastic. I'm glad it was well done for you, Katie.
It certainly
And as
was.
a publicist, I would certainly hope I've got a handle on decent pitches, so it's good to know that it's working out.
Well, that is exactly true. Like, you should know all about a good pitch because you work in the PR game. So tell us a little bit about what you do, your business, like paint us the picture of Lisa's business life.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been working in publicity for about 10 years now. The last 7 years have been dedicated exclusively to working with health, fitness, and wellness entrepreneurs. And I've seen such a rise in the number of fitness, health, and wellness entrepreneurs who've left their stable corporate jobs and they've gone to pursue something that they're really passionate about. But when you start your own business, you can't necessarily go and hire the big PR agencies of the world that are going to charge you $10,000 a month on a 12-month retainer. So my goal was to really create an opportunity for these entrepreneurs to get publicity opportunities at a rate that wasn't going to drive them bankrupt. So I'm really, really passionate about helping people who've, gone to pursue their passion and making sure that their audiences know that they exist so that they can connect with them and get clients and get noticed.
So I'm really excited to get into this and to hear a few more examples of some of the ways that you've helped other newer wellness entrepreneurs get noticed, because that's really the types of people that will be listening to this show. And we've talked on the email about this concept of getting media attention, and I get asked a lot about it. I see a lot of conversation about it in Facebook groups and places. And I actually recently interviewed a journalist on the podcast, Rachel Jansen, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But she and I talked more about the new media. So she was really talking about how you can use blogging and you don't necessarily need traditional media to get your name out there. So I'm really pleased to be able to show the other side of that story, I guess. So the question in all of that, Lisa, is why should we care as entrepreneurs about attracting traditional media attention? Like, what are the benefits from your perspective?
Sure. There are definitely a few reasons why publicity is going to be really beneficial to any wellpreneur out there. So number one, when you get interviewed by a major media outlet, you're establishing your own credibility. You're putting yourself out there as a thought leader and you're positioning yourself as an expert, which is going to be fantastic in terms of setting you apart from your competition. As well, when you're starting your own blog and doing your own social media, that's a fantastic way for you to control your message, but you may not have the reach that some of these bigger media outlets may have. So I think publicity is a really good way to disseminate your personal message to a massive audience. Especially when you think about having on your website, having those as seen on logos. There's such a credibility to saying, I've been seen on X TV show and on Y website or in Z magazine. It really helps you stand out from your crowd and establish a trust with your prospective customers.
And so do you have, and you know, this might be jumping straight into the detail, but when you work with someone on getting media attention, like what are the types of metrics of success that you would use?
Sure. So I always think it's really great for entrepreneurs to establish their goals before they go into any media activity. So some common metrics that I would use with my typical clients include, would they mention your company or your specific brand? Do they include a photo or your logo in the piece that they're covering? Do you have quotes from your spokesperson? Do they include your key messages? And is there a call to action included? And especially with the rise of digital content, it's so fantastically easy to measure the success of this. So if you're interviewed on a blog or on a website and they include your link there, you can use a special URL that's going to help you identify how many click-throughs you've had from that site.
Okay. And I mean, I love that you've started with that, setting the goals up front, because I guess, you know, to me, it sounds kind of similar to podcasting and why I podcast, right? It's definitely to build that credibility and build myself as a thought leader in this particular industry. But it's a slow burn, right? But I'm very clear in my mind of why I'm doing it, what impact I want it to have on my business. And so I guess, you know, when I think about media, it's like, well, would you go after the big daily newspaper who, you know, might be read by 80,000 people, but are they 80,000 people that care about your particular topic? Like, how do you make sure that you're getting in the places that you're going to most likely find your target market?
And that is such an interesting comment that you make, Katie, because I would definitely say that the majority of my clients, when they come to me, they want to get on the big national newspapers and in the national TV shows. But the reality is, if your clients aren't listening to Forbes, it's great to get, or reading Forbes, it's great to get a mention in there. But if you're not connecting with your target audience, is that really the point? So I really think that people should consider their goals when they're going for publicity. So for example, if you're a local business, let's say you're an independent studio, essentially your reach is only as big as your local community. So national or international publicity recognition is fantastic in terms of building your credibility, but is that really going to get people through the door? So I really do think there is a huge emphasis on having there's a strategy to having local coverage, absolutely, because that's what's going to probably bring people into your business. But there is definitely a validity to having that national reach and saying, you know, I've been interviewed on Good Morning America or another outlet like that to establish your credibility.
Because, I mean, I can imagine that, you know, being on Good Morning America or one of those morning talk shows, like it would be, well, terrifying, I'm sure. But, you know, there's kind of this, wow, that's pretty big and exciting. But what's the type of longevity that you'd have from something like that? Like, is it really going to have that impact on somebody's wellness business over here in wherever?
So one thing I'd always advise is, you know what, start locally, because you're just growing as an entrepreneur and you're just getting used to getting publicity coverage. And if you're doing that on a national scale, oh my goodness, how nerve-wracking might that be? So if you start off on a local scale, that way, at least if you make a stumbling block or you have an error, it's not going to be with a necessarily huge reach. And the other thing about publicity is that media begets media. So once you get one piece of coverage, you turn into a snowball effect, getting even more coverage. So starting local, I think, is very, very beneficial to health and fitness and wellness entrepreneurs.
And why is that? Is it just because journos like a tested subject? Or
They do. Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you're pitching a huge TV show. So two of our biggest shows in Canada here are The Social and City Line. If you don't have any video footage of you doing video before, you're not going to get on TV right away. They need to see how you perform on camera. So don't discount the positivity of doing a smaller broadcast first and getting used to the camera and practicing and refining and honing those on-camera skills. Because once you do really well with that, then you can go ahead and pitch the bigger outlets and they'll have an opportunity to see your media reel in advance and see how well you perform.
And so then, because I mean, I kind of feel that way about having a podcast or a YouTube channel because you're building almost like your portfolio, almost as the step, I guess, before getting your first media gig. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I'm definitely a big fan of that. So one thing I really emphasize with my clients is making use of social media. It's such a fantastic opportunity, number one, to find and research the journalists you want to reach out to, but you have an opportunity to start creating your own content that can actually lead to publicity coverage. So for example, if you're looking at pitching a TV show and they're going to want to see how you perform first, go on YouTube, start making videos, and then share them with your friends and family and let them share some constructive criticism on how you can perform better. And that's such a great way for you to build your comfort level in front of a camera. And then with YouTube, since it's not live video, you can record it and re-record it until you're happy with it, and then you can send that out as a pitch. Or for example, if you're looking at doing something on live television, then start practicing with something like Periscope or Facebook Live or YouTube Live, because then you really get to see how you perform when things are live and you don't get to do any editing.
And, you know, I'm just thinking as you're saying all that it's exactly what I do as well. Like, I've, had a pitch recently and I wasn't 100% sure. I feel like the person's going to be a good fit for the podcast, but I'm not 100% sure. And so my first thing to do was to go and find another audio interview that she'd done and have a listen to that, just so I could hear how she presented there and if it was going to be different to how she was presenting in writing. So I guess it's a natural instinct.
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, of course.
It is. And so then, like, how do we go about identifying the right relationships? I mean, you're in Canada, I'm in Australia. I think, my audience is kind of mostly Australian, but all over the world, including Canada. But is there a kind of a way to go about identifying those right places that's sort of location independent?
I mean, I think I would argue to definitely look for, if you're trying to figure out where your audience is first off. Are you targeting men? Are you targeting women? What are their specific demographics and psychographics? One thing that I don't know if a lot of entrepreneurs are aware of is that a lot of publications have something called a media kit online. And what this media kit has is it's provided for both publicists and advertisers. So for an advertorial or an advertising point of view, it'll tell you exactly who their audience reaches, what their typical age is, what their income is, etc. So when you start reviewing those publications and you see that their media kit and their target audience is in line with your own, that's a perfect indication that they're the kind of outlet that you're going to want to be going for.
Oh, okay. So you're saying, like, if it's an online magazine, to go onto their website and look for their media kit or something that describes their particular, because that's what they're writing to appeal to sponsors and advertisers, isn't it?
Definitely. Let's say, your goal is to get into Shape magazine. So if you do a search for Shape magazine media kit, you'll find out exactly who their demographics are reaching. And as well, you'll find something in there called an editorial calendar, which tells you what the stories they're bringing to light each month are going to be. So if you have an opportunity to see, okay, you know what, in September, they're writing about something that's totally in line with my brand and I could be a really good resource for them and I can serve as an expert, then you know that you're going to want to pitch someone like that, because not only are you going to be reaching your target audience, but you're also going to be providing content that's really valuable to them, because they've already said that this is the kind of stuff we're looking for.
Oh, that's juicy. Okay, So just say you find something like that, would you just do a pitch on a topic or would you actually write something in full?
So I would always do a pitch first, just because you're not sure that they already want to use your content. So there's no point to going ahead and creating a whole bunch of stuff that may not necessarily get used. So another tool that you can look at is, let's say you've gone through the editorial calendar and you know what they're looking for. Then when you flip to the front of a magazine, they have something called a masthead there, and it'll indicate who the editor-in-chief is, who the health editor is, who the beauty editor is, etc. And you can go through that list and figure out exactly who you need to be speaking to. And once you find out out the correct editor's name. Then you can do some research on that person. I love using social media for what I call sleuthing as opposed to creeping, where you can get some information about the person and what they've written about lately, and you can see what kind of content they're going after. And then with a little more internet research, you're more than likely going to be able to find their email address. So then you can reach out to them and say, hey, I see in September you're writing about seasonal fruit, and I'm a nutritionist, let's say. I would love to share some recipes about how to use, let's say, blueberries in the fall. The recipes are vegan, gluten-free, sugar-free, etc., and whatever else they may be, and see if that's of interest to them. And if it is, then you can go from there and start developing that relationship, as well as developing content that honestly makes the journalist's life easier.
And so would you go straight to email, or if they're on Twitter, as lots of journalists seem to be, would you spark something there first?
So I would definitely work on developing a relationship before you do any pitching. So my strategy would be to first find them online. So whether that's on Twitter, I would look them up on LinkedIn, not necessarily add them just yet, but take a look at their stuff, give them a Google and see what they're writing about. The one thing I really caution people to be is genuine. Like the content that they're sharing. Like it, share it, leave your feedback on it, comment on it, but always do it from a genuine place. Let them see that you exist before you go into the pitch. So I would probably share some of their content, maybe share an article through a tweet saying, I know you wrote about this last month. I thought this would be really interesting for you to check. Gotten on their radar, then I would go in with a pitch and say, hey, you know what? We've connected on Twitter before. I see that this is coming up in your editorial calendar. Is there any way that I can be of expertise to you and help you out with the article you're writing?
Oh, that's awesome. And so would you expect in this modern age that most gigs like that should be free, like you're doing it for free, or would some of them be paid?
No, the majority of the time, editorial coverage will be something you're doing for free. Though with things like television shows, for example, so, the morning shows and the daytime shows, they tend to have their featured experts. So, once you've been on the show 2 or 3 times, you can actually get yourself into a position where you get paid to be a recurring guest on their show. So not only are you reaching your target audience, not only are you getting that established credibility and that third-party endorsement, but now you're actually getting paid to share your expertise.
But you don't go into this game thinking you're going to make your millions, right?
No, definitely not. You may grow to a position where even with print publications, maybe you're a contributing writer and you might get paid for that. But for editorial coverage, you are just getting the blessing of their third-party endorsement. And when you consider what people might pay for an advertisement in a magazine like that, you're getting so much more when you get a publicity feature.
And I think that that's a really important point because, I studied professional writing and editing not that long ago, just as a bit of a fun thing because I love writing. And it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And at that stage, there was still a lot of you pitched for paid writing gigs. Whereas what I've seen happen over the years since is with blogging and, entrepreneurs out there wanting to get their name out, that it's really, you should be seeing the value of those things in terms that are not necessarily monetary. So I don't know what your perspective is on that and how the industry's changed.
Well, the reality is that newsrooms are shrinking now. The way that we used to see magazines rooms and newspaper rooms full of editors and journalists, their staff are getting cut down so much now. So the opportunity to be paid isn't as high as it used to be. But again, when you're thinking about it from the perspective that you're establishing your authority, you're building your brand awareness, you're creating a hype and a curiosity around your brand, that is so invaluable and probably worth far more than just getting paid for a few $100s to contribute an article.
Yeah, I think there's just a different type of value exchange, isn't it?
Definitely, because you're getting in front of their audience.
Yeah, and that's priceless. So say we got a gig, so we've reached out to someone, they're keen to either interview us or have us write something. Like, how do we make sure that we are a great subject, that we, really make them want to work with us again and then get like the most mileage out of whatever is produced in that experience?
Definitely. So the most important point I would share is to be prepared. One thing I always do on behalf of my clients when we're working on, let's say, a TV interview is I will ask the producer for an outline of the questioning route. That not to be rehearsed or to be robotic during an interview, but that way you can really have an idea of what questions you're going to be able to expect. And then you can bring your answers forward confidently. You can do some research. You can reference statistics. And then when you know what the questions are going to be in advance, or at least you have an idea of which way the questions are going to go, you can align them with your business's key messaging. So always referencing them back to your brand and how it aligns and highlights and shines a positive spotlight on your brand. Another thing I would advise is always be honest. There's no shame in if you're being interviewed and they ask you a question that you're not sure about. Don't lie. Don't make something up. Just say, you know what? I'm not too sure about that, but I'd be happy to get back to you on it. But then also, of course, make sure you actually do get back to them on it, whether it's via email or a phone call. Something else I would caution people to do is prepare some sound bites. One thing that media are really particular about is that their listeners, their viewers, their readers, that they can walk away with something to take away and take action on. So if you can prepare easy sound bites that someone's going to easily remember, that's going to be fantastic as well. And one more point I would add in there is to not make it self-serving. You know, if you're being interviewed and you mention your brand name 30 times, they're wise to that and they're going to edit it out. So make sure you're always keeping the media's audience top of mind and think about how can my insight and my expertise really contribute to and enhance the lives of these people rather than just selling yourself. Because when you do things from that perspective, you're not going to be asked back.
Yeah, so it's really just the rules of any good content creation, really.
Definitely. And then, sorry, you'd also asked about how you would get the most mileage from the experience. I mean, number one, you can always say that as I've been featured in Shape magazine, let's say, for example, being able to put that logo on your website establishes so much credibility there. And then if you know in advance you're going to be featured somewhere or it's going to be happening live, take advantage of social media, promote it, say, hey, I'm going to be on this show on this date, and make sure you're tagging the outlet in there. And that's because they're probably going to retweet it or share it. And that way, when they're sharing it with their audience, think about how much more massive that reach is. So make sure that you're getting that out there and letting people know it's going to be happening. And once it's happened, share, and share again, and make sure that you tag them because they're probably likely to give you a retweet or a reshare in whatever capacity.
Gorgeous. So can I just come back to what you mentioned, having sound bites ready? Can you tell us what you mean by sound bites and any advice on how to do that for the listeners?
Absolutely. So I think because so many of us are so ingrained in our health, fitness, and wellness businesses, we tend to get really technical in what we're saying. But we have to remember that the consumer who's listening to that, they may not be as well versed. They're just looking for a top line, top level overview. So I think anything you can say in, 10-cent words versus 50-cent words, like using the biggest words you can come up with, it makes you sound smart, but can someone really relate to that? Is there a way that you can compare things that'll make sense to an audience? So the best way that you can drill things down, smaller syllables, even if you can get a concept into as little as 3 words, that'll be really helpful so that the audience can really walk away with something actionable in mind.
Okay, that's great advice. Thank you. And I mean, there's something that I don't know if this happens in business, but I know my husband and I were recently in a newspaper article about something that's happened in our personal lives because we've built our family with the help of surrogates, a surrogate from overseas. And so we were sharing that story because it's big news in Australia at the moment, and we wanted to kind of present a really positive perspective. And we were really worried because it is such a hot, controversial topic that we might do this interview and we would think we'd be presented in some way, and then it might get turned and cast us really negatively or used against us. And I wonder if people would worry in business about the same thing happening, that what they say might be then used for a different agenda. Like, does that happen? Like, what are some of the nightmares that can happen in this situation?
Oh man, I do have a few stories that I could share. So typically one thing I would caution, two questions to ask before you participate in an interview. The first would be, who else are they talking to? Are they interviewing your competitors? Are they interviewing people who are really similarly aligned with your business? Who else are they speaking to so you can better understand how you fit into that story? And another thing I would ask is, what is the slant or the angle of the piece? You know, if it's going to be somewhat negative, then chances are you may actually just want to decline and not be a part of it. So I think that's something valid that you can ask before participating in an interview. But one thing that I would say is, you know, don't ask to proof a story before it runs once you've participated in it, because media are not a big fan of that. So ask the questions in advance, get a really good understanding of how you're going to be presented in the overall context, and then you can make a really informed decision from there on whether or not it's the right move for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Those two questions are just, yeah, that's gold. Thank you so much, Lisa. So do you have any stories? Like, I'd love to hear like I don't know, a case study maybe of someone you've worked with and the media attention they got and what impact that had on them?
Sure. So are you looking for a positive one, or do you want one that's, you know, a little bit of a learning case study that I can share?
Oh, well, I can't say no to that. How about we do a learning and then we'll finish with the positive.
Okay, so let's go for a learning case study. So I was working with a boot camp brand and we traveled to Ottawa. So I'm from Toronto. Ottawa is about a 5-hour drive away from here. And we were going to do a live on-air morning show. So I did a lot of coordination with the producer. Everything was figured out. It was fantastic. So the cameras are on and the host is with the owner of this company. And she calls her by my name. So she the interviewer hadn't actually gone through the notes to learn the CEO's name, but instead referenced me. And this is live television. So she wasn't, the CEO wasn't actually really able to say, actually, my name is. So she ended up just having to go with it from there and just roll with it. And once the cameras were off, then we had to be like, so Lisa's actually the girl behind the scenes. Oh. So I would say my biggest learning and takeaway from that was to spell everything out. Now, before I do a TV interview, I make sure that the producer gets a cheat sheet well in advance. This is the interviewee's name. This is her title. This is the name of the company. Here are all the social media handles. And I make sure the morning of that this has all been reinforced. So that was one really big learning and how to make sure things go smoothly.
Oh, I love that cheat sheet concept. That is just brilliant. But oh gosh, hashtag awkward.
Oh my goodness. But I think anything you can do to make their lives easier, and I don't know if this is limited just to publicity, but just anything in general, whatever you can do to make someone's job easier will always be appreciated. And with media, they're dealing with so many pitches that come in every day, so many stories that they need to film or write or whatever, put on air, whatever their context is. Anything you can do to make it as error proof as possible will be beneficial not only for the media, but also for you as well.
I love that. Oh, yeah, you're speaking my language. So, and I do think, we learn more from the stuff ups or the bad things than just the things that go perfect and smoothly from day dot. But let's hear the more positive story.
Oh, so many good positive stories I could share. I've had examples where, I've been working with some different companies and they may look at submitting an ad in a paper and, they're paying X thousand amount of dollars for the ad to be designed and input. But then on the other hand, I'll reach out to an editor and say, hey, do you want to try this fitness class? We would love to have you come in. You're welcome to write a review about it. And then, when that media person comes in, you give them the most exceptional experience, not because they're media, but because they're a client, like the same experience you would give anybody else. And to see them write about that in a positive piece that takes up about the same amount of retail that an ad would, and to know that you've gotten that coverage for free and also with a third-party unbiased endorsement, that adds so much more credibility to your brand. And I mean, what's more interesting? To look at an ad, would you really be convinced to be like, maybe I should try that? Or would you really read that article from a journalist perspective and be like, wow, she had really good things to say and a positive experience and got amazing results. Maybe I should check that out.
Yeah, right. And so, a lot of what we've talked about has been very much DIY media, like DIY PR, I guess, which is exactly, you know, what I wanted to do. And that's awesome because it gives everyone in the audience the tools to apply this themselves. But I'm just wondering, like, well, when should someone recognize that getting help from someone like you that does what you do, that I imagine is going to have more networks, more ways into places, maybe, I don't know, like what is the reason why someone would go, actually, I need to go pro with this?
Yeah, so when you're going pro, you know, it might be you have a massive launch coming up and your hands are full with a million other things. And when you're hiring a publicist or a PR agency, really what we're getting paid for not only is our ideas and our creativity when it comes to pitching, but it really is for our relationships. So, but again, for most bootstrapping entrepreneurs who are just beginning, that's not necessarily something they may have a budget for. Hiring a PR team is also going to come in handy. Let's say you're in crisis communications mode. I've worked at a boot camp one time where we did have a crisis come up, and we had to navigate that very carefully. And it's great to have an experienced team right there who's able to create the key messages, work with your internal audiences, consider your stakeholders, and make sure that everything is positioned to the media in the right way to control that message. Because if something goes out negatively damaging your brand, it is so difficult to recover from something like that. So crisis communication mode is definitely one time you're going to want to hire the experts. When you have a massive launch coming up is another time that you may want to look into people who have a little more expertise with working with the media.
Yeah, that's just reminded me, here in Australia, I think the wellness industry particularly can cop quite a bit of flack from traditional media. Like, you know, sometimes when you can just tell that people want the controversial story. So I don't know if you've heard of like Pete Evans, and Belle Gibson, who are very high profile Australians, but they're high profile all over the world. And at the same time, it seemed like something happened to Pete. I think he had a cookbook coming out, and a doctor came out and said that if that recipe for baby whatever could kill babies. And that just went viral. And then Belle Gibson was the one that created the app. I can't even remember what it's called now, but it was listed on Apple's new iWatch, and then it all came out that she basically lied about her whole medical history. And you can imagine, like, the media here just went hell for leather on it. And I guess, you know, it's one of those, I feel like in Australia, and I don't know if it's the same over there, wellness is one of those topics that can bring people together, but it can really divide people as well, because everyone has different opinions. And everyone has such a strong opinion too. Yes. Yeah. So, you know, I think that really kind of brought home what you were saying, like when it gets seriously into crisis territory, you really want to tread carefully. Definitely. And as an entrepreneur, you're naturally so passionate about your brand that, you know, you may come off as incredibly defensive. And when you're defensive, that may make you look worse, essentially. Mm-hmm. So to have a third party come in objectively and really assess the messaging and the tone of voice in which things are said is going to be beneficial to a brand then. Mm. Wow. Thank you so much, Lisa. This has just been so cool. I can't wait to do the show notes because I know there were so many juicy little tips in there. But thank you. So how can people find out more about what you do? Sure. So I am in the process of launching my online school for entrepreneurs, and it's called Make Media Friends. And that's a resource where I teach health, fitness, and wellness entrepreneurs how to do their own public relations and how to really develop those media relationships, essentially that you can get yourself in a position where you're not necessarily always pitching the media, but you've already established with a personal and professional relationship with them, where when they're looking for a source, they're actually going to come to you. So people can find out more about that at www.makemediafriends.com. Great. Thank you. That sounds like a fun course to get involved in. So thank you so much for joining us on the show and staying up late to talk to us here on Aussie time. Gladly. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. You're so welcome. All right. Come on, be honest. Who's off to tweet some journos then? I really hope that you enjoyed that and got lots of ideas. I know that I did. Like, I actually think it's a really, really good idea that what she talks about, Lisa talks about, because this whole business, online business world, it's all about relationships. So the more relationships you have, the better. So get out there, do it, go connect. If you enjoyed the episode, please, before you go, subscribe to the show, rate and review the podcast, and tell a friend who you love. It's how I can grow the podcast and keep doing what I do. And I love doing what I do for you. So thank you. See you next time for episode 50. We're going to have some fun. Don't miss it.